It is exciting and scary and everything in between when I think about the future of voiceover. Things are moving at such a fast pace. And just in business in general, technology is just a multiplying factor. And when you consider how quickly that technology is advancing, and then you add into it internet and what it's allowing us to do, the possibilities are amazing. And one of the things that it's doing in voiceover, it has democratized the industry. It used to be that, without giving you a long history lesson on voiceover, not all that long ago, a few decades ago, was pretty much controlled by gatekeepers. And if you wanted access to work, you had to go through a union and or an agent. Usually it was both. And the jobs weren't as plentiful because the technology now is so cheap that virtually anybody can make high-end video. Obviously, it's better if they have skill, but even the tools within e-learning. Back when I was working in the industry, it was in the earlier stages of technology development within the corporate learning space. And the prices that people would pay for learning platforms, for learning management systems were just compared to today, it was apples and oranges. You couldn't even make the comparison. It was we've come such a long way and things are so much more accessible. And within voiceover, the good thing that it's done is it has allowed people opportunities at an entry level. Whereas before, you were pretty much jumping in to the deep end of the pool if you wanted to be a voiceover talent, and you sank or you swam. But today, people without as much talent can do work, and a lot of that work comes through much smaller companies, companies that aren't in first world countries, where monetary restrictions and the budgets just aren't what they are in North America. And so you have a lot of opportunities there. And I think that it's incredible and awesome that people who otherwise would have had to quit their jobs and made this a full-time effort just to see if they could do it can now, on a part-time basis, get their feet wet and begin to work with smaller companies with smaller budgets. So that's, I think, the exciting part of voiceover. You look at the other end of it, the part that concerns a lot of voiceover talent is the artificial intelligence. And everybody's afraid their job's going to be taken over by the robots. And I think to a certain extent, there is some truth to that. But my perspective, having been here for quite a while in both the learning and in the voiceover side of things, is that technology will find a place. I remember, I'll never forget, early on in my career, I worked in radio broadcasting. And when the internet came along, it had been around, but in terms of for public usage, the whole .com era, pre-2000 in the 90s, I remember there were radio station owners and groups who were selling their signals, their air transmission, and going all internet because they thought that was the next big thing. Well, it did become a big thing, but it wasn't the next big thing. There was a big gap. There was several decades before they were far ahead of their time. It was several decades before that really came into play. And even the way that it's developed hasn't been exactly the way that they had forecast. So it's easy to get ahead of ourselves, but I can certainly see some things that are happening. Number one is this: AI. Let's just talk about artificial intelligence. It's doing some amazing things when it comes to voice. It's nowhere near it can't do what the human voice can do, but what it is doing is opening up a market of people that otherwise would not or could not pay for a voice to be able to get something that sounds fairly human to read their script. So that's where we are now seeing AI beginning to insert itself into all of this. Not with larger companies, and I don't think it will ever become a thing with larger companies. But I think for those who beforehand were not willing or simply didn't have the budget to do it, I think it's finding a place there. I think the big roadblock to artificial intelligence for voice in terms of far, spread use of AI voice is that a computer does not understand context. It does not feel emotion. And when I'm teaching a student voiceover, we start with the end and work backwards. The end goal for them is to be hired, and that only happens if they're believed. It's about connecting with an audience. It's about it's about delivering the message in a compelling way that makes people want to listen, and that only happens if they believe you. And the only way somebody will believe a voiceover talent is if they feel something when they hear them speak. When I say feel something, it doesn't have to be dramatic. It could be a sense of trust or security or a sense of hope. We certainly need to be able to generate a sense of authority, a sense that this information is important. As voice talent, we have to communicate in such a way that the listener feels and senses the importance of what we're talking about, or the excitement of what we're talking about, or the truth of what we're talking about. A computer doesn't have a capability to understand the context and to communicate emotion. So I think we'll begin to see AI used more, again, by people who previously have not used it at all, or for things that aren't considered extremely important. It needs to get out there. They're not high budget projects, and the information just needs to be put out there as if it was being put on a billboard for people to read, except there will be a voice to it to allow the convenience of hearing it instead of reading it. But not a lot of weight is put on compelling communication. So strictly for information purposes, I can see AI having a big impact there. But again, at the end of the day, much like with pricing, it's going to be you that decides whether AI is appropriate for the content that you're training. For some things, I would imagine it would be perfectly acceptable. Other things, possibly not. For instance, can AI convey the importance of following safety training? Can the listener feel the weight of that, the importance of that? Probably not to the point that they would with a live human voice. So these will be issues that you will be making. All we can do on the voiceover side of things, all we can do is to develop our skill to the point where we can be as compelling as possible, which presents you with a good option when it comes to using voice for voiceover training. But regardless of what happens, it will be very interesting, scary, but at the same time exciting. And I'm kind of looking forward to see how it all pans out.